I love when the boys are blocking shots and making great plays for me.
Jordan Eberle and the Uma Hat are back.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you your favorite team every day and sometimes on the weekend, like on this episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. My name is, of course, Erica L. Ayala, once again, your host of Locked On Kraken. And we got some news after Friday's episode posted. Some good news, some meh, not so good news, and then some great news, which is why I'm wearing my Pirates hat again. So let's start with the not so great news, although probably not surprising either. Yanni Gourde officially placed on a long-term injury reserve that is retroactive to January 4th. So even though we had reported that Yanni Gourde was making his way back to the ice, apparently whatever tests or trials or whatever were happening were unfavorable. So not expecting Yanni Gourde back anytime soon. But what we did hear is that Jordan Eberle returned back to the team and in fact was on the ice as the Seattle Kraken got a 2-1 win over the Florida Panthers, the first game of their back-to-back in the Sunshine State of Florida. They will take on the Tampa Bay Lightning later tonight. We'll get into that. But this was an okay performance. I listened to the radio broadcast. And so from hearing Everett Fitzhugh talk about the game, you know, Everett and Al were talking about the game, and I played around with the slog, right? I leaned into the slog of it all, and I think Everett felt that this was still a bit of a slog game. I was listening on the radio, saw some highlights, but highlights are going to look sharp. I will tell you that the Seattle Kraken, when you look at the game flow chart, this game actually favored in all situations the Florida Panthers. The Seattle Kraken were also outshot. I believe it was 27-22, 21-22 shots. We'll go over some stats, instant analysis with Allison Lucan in just a minute. But for me, I almost don't care what it looked like. It seemed to have felt good to the players. We'll hear from Dan Bilesma. We'll hear a little bit from Joey Daccord, who gets yet another win for this team. That's the important thing. And we talked about the slog and perhaps the slog impacting Florida. I'm not going to talk too much about that because I am still going to record a squad cast with Armando Velez, and I pleaded with the Kraken to not make me go on that squad cast having to defend why the Kraken, couldn't get another win. But I don't have to do that. I can talk about a Seattle Kraken win and ask Armando all the questions about a Florida loss. In the grand scheme of things, this is a good bounce back from the break, a good reintegration of Jordan Eberle, who we did hear from Dan Bilesma before the game, is going to be, I don't think he exactly used the words restricted on minutes, but there is going to be an integration period. He's not fully back. He was on a line with Brandon Tanev and Mitchell Stevens for most of the night. The lines got kind of blended or thrown into the blender, not completely thrown into the blender, but there was a soft, massaging and tossing of the lines, if you will. And so it's good that Eberle's back. It's not so great that Yanni Gourde is not back, but it's super amazing that the Seattle Kraken get this win. I mentioned Allison Lucan and the instant analysis. This is another quality start for Joey Daccord, 26 of 27 saves on shots faced. He is 1.3 above expected. Shot attempts for the Seattle Kraken, 41 compared to 53 for the Florida Panthers. It was 22 shots on goal for the Kraken. Good old Bjorkstrand number, 27 for the Florida Panthers. Shot quality favored the Panthers. Again, a quality start for Joey Dax. And honestly, Joey Daccord made some phenomenal saves. And as you'll hear from him shortly, thought that the defense did a great job cleaning up the aisle, so to speak, in front of him. And that was a huge difference. We weren't seeing those wraparound goals. We only saw the one goal. And then there was one that was disallowed. But the Seattle Kraken, and we heard from Shane Wright, they wanted to keep things simple. I think they did that. The passing was simple but effective. And this was a good win for the Seattle Kraken. Joey Daccord, who, I mean, he's basically our only NHL goalie. I don't know if he's expected to go back to back. We didn't hear anything about that from Dan Bylsma. Steska is still the second goaltender as far as I know. I haven't seen any reports otherwise. Dan Bylsma will speak to media before the game. There was no morning skate or anything of that nature. So stay tuned on the channel. If I get a quick update, I'll post something. But I wanted to get this out before the game and before Dan Bylsma was going to speak. But at the moment, I want you to hear from Joey Daccord, who again gets another quality start and another win for the Seattle Kraken.
Joey, how did you feel in your first game after a really long break?
Yeah, no, I felt great. Break was awesome. I think all the boys got some sun. Could see a lot of tans out there on the ice tonight. But just everybody was rested and ready to go, and we played a great game tonight. It's fun to get a win in our first one back. I thought it was just good team play. All three phases of the game, yeah, it was fun to watch. The guys just keep it simple, make plays north, and ton of great defensive plays tonight as well. So I love when the boys are blocking shots and making great plays for me.
I wanted to ask you about that. We talked about connected play in terms of the offense going up the ice, but it looked like your defenders were really in sync with you, clearing pucks when you needed them, clearing lanes, that kind of thing. How did you feel that connectivity with them was for you?
Well, we have great D on our team. I'm lucky to have them play in front of me, and we're lucky to have them on our team. And I mean, just if you look at the last 5-6 minutes, I think they got one shot in the last 5 or 6 minutes. So, your success rate's going to be pretty high if you only get one shot up a goal late in the game like that. And, it's every single night. The guys just working as hard as they can, trying to block every shot. And, I really appreciate it. And, when it does get through, I just try to, do it for them because they work so hard for me.
That's a really talented Florida team over there. Can you describe what those final minutes feel like? There's just one shot, but there's chaos, bodies are everywhere. What is that like for you? Yeah,
it was a lot of hectic plays. I feel like a lot of times 6-on-5 is just going to be throw pucks to the net and hope for a bounce, hope for some, a bounce to an open guy or a shot in off a leg or something. And I thought our guys did a good job of staying calm, chipping pucks out when we needed, and taking an extra second to try to make a play if we had the time. So, hopefully we're in that position a lot here moving forward.
As I mentioned at the top of the show, today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, the US's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. All right, wanted to make sure we got in this UMA hat in between what is a back-to-back. And I got to say, Kraken fans, we know back-to-backs are not usually our friend. So there's some work that has to be done. I guess we'll see Steska. I can't imagine though that if things get a little dicey that Joey Daccord isn't ready to go into the game, or do you just start Joey knowing that you have a couple of days rest because the team is going to be getting to St. Louis? I guess we'll find out. But as I mentioned in the first segment, we will hear from Dan Bylsma, and I'll try to hop on if I can. There's also a lot of women's basketball, like a lot of good games in women's basketball happening. So might be pulled on to CBS, but either way, we'll have it here. And as I mentioned, we'll break down that Florida game. And if there was a slog, who was impacted by the slog? What did that look like? We'll talk about that on a squad cast show with Armando Velez that we'll record later today, Sunday. I do want to talk, though, about some keys to tonight's game against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Here is what the head-to-head looks like if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, no worries. I got you covered. The Tampa Bay Lightning come into this game 66 points, 31-20-4. Their home record 18-7-2. That's pretty solid. Your Seattle Kraken 25-29-4, 54 points on the board with an away record of 12-15-0. 6-3-1 in their last 10 games. Tampa Bay 4-5-1 in their last 10 games for Seattle. Jared McCann, who did get a goal in that game against the Panthers, is our leading scorer with 43 points. Nikita Kucherov, 82 points for the Tampa Bay Lightning. PK is at an 80.7% clip, but we also just heard from Joey Daccord that the Seattle Kraken PK doing pretty solid, or at least did, including not having to be on the PK. The power play, 18.6% to 26.9% in favor of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Never been such a strong suit for the Seattle Kraken, but I think they're starting to find their way, find their comfort zone. Players I think we really need to keep an eye on here. I think we're looking at, of course, Joey Daccord. Is he going to start in this game? Is Stetska gonna start and then maybe have a super short leash just to give Joey a little bit more rest? Of course, Philip Grubauer not being available just yet to come back from Coachella Valley is something that this team is really going to have to figure out. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken also brought to you by a new sponsor, Trade Coffee. Now, I am not a coffee drinker, but my mother is, to the point where I know alarmingly large amounts of coffee facts, even though I do not drink coffee. That's because starting with a good cup of coffee was something that I knew needed to happen for my mom growing up. But sometimes you get tired of settling for certain grocery store brands, and that's why I was able to put my mom on to Trade Coffee. And let me tell you, so far, the experience has been next level. Trade is the #1 specialty coffee marketplace in the US, bringing you fresh coffee from over 50 countries' top roasters. Their experts have taste tested thousands of coffees, curating over 450 amazing roasts. Whether you're new to coffee or know exactly what you like, they'll handpick the perfect match for you. Now, again, not a coffee drinker myself, but when I told my mom about Trade Coffee, I could actually just go through the quiz that they had, because I know, again, a lot about coffee and I know what kind of coffee my mom likes. And so I took the quiz on her behalf, and it came up with all of these different brands. And I walked through the process on the phone with my mom, and she's like, "Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, that sounds really good." This is someone who for my entire life has, let's just say, been very particular about her coffee. So right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/LockedOnNHL. That's drinktrade, TRADE.com/LockedOnNHL for 40% off your first order. drinktrade.com/LockedOnNHL. I want to see the Seattle Kraken be able to do what they did in Florida. Well, they'll still be in Florida, but in against the Panthers. That is to be aggressive, start early. I said again, I loved the passing, but for me, the defense, the defensive support, I don't think there were a lot of bad giveaways, generally speaking. That being said, the Panthers did get in pretty deep on Joey Daccord. He was rock solid and again made that initial save. It was swiped away. The one goal that was scored, I noticed that Brandon Montour, he just got he got behind a stride, and the Panthers were able to shield him off and have an open lane to Joey Daccord. He was just a hair behind there. So making sure you know your coverages, you know who's in your area, that continues to be something that I want to see from the Seattle Kraken team. So hopefully they can improve that. We do know that Eberle is probably going to be on some minutes restrictions. Does that mean he suits up even at all? Or do you want some fresh legs and legs that can go on when you're on a back-to-back? So I think he's going to be curious to see if there are any game time decisions. Matty Beniers was at one point announced as a game time decision. So are there still some players with bumps and bruises that need rest? And how will that impact tonight's roster? Well, we'll talk about that a little bit in the coming days on Locked On Kraken. But overall, I'm just wanted to get on the microphone because we get an Uma Hat game. We're back in the win column, or we stay in the win column because we got that win against Calgary. So if we take a look at the standings, still very much an uphill climb here for the Seattle Kraken. With the win, though, as it stands going into tonight's game, with a game against St. Louis coming up, the Seattle Kraken 54 points in 7th place. So 5 spots behind Vancouver in that wild card race. The Calgary Flames are up there with 60. We have 54 points. Utah, Anaheim, and St. Louis all ahead of the Seattle Kraken. So definitely some work to do. I think it's going to be tough unless this team really commits to playing a consistent game, which has been exactly what got them to where they are, as in not where they want to be. So we'll see, but taking it game by game, do think the vibes tend to be good. There are some decisions to make regarding this roster with the bumps and bruises, with the injuries, and of course with goaltending, but we will have you covered on the Locked On podcast episode. As always, a reminder to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, please, 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 and hold fast, stay true, and loud and proud we say tonight, let's go Kraken. I will catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.